Ross. Now they call it Chattanooga. Renamed to honor, or to make people forget what happened. Here's an article from Franklin College in Franklin, Indiana. The Carnegie Institute of Washington, Eugenics Record Office, founded by Mrs. E.H. Harriman. Anybody heard that name before? E.H. Harriman. How many saw Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? He's getting ready to blow up the train, you know, and he said, I work for Mr. E.H. Harriman. Super rich gazillionaire back in those days. Very much involved in wanting to improve humanity by eliminating the inferior. Carnegie started the organization, now in Berkeley, California, that fights to keep creation out of schools. It's his funding that supplied the start of that organization. The whole idea that man is superior, there's a bunch of guys been involved in this. The Bible says, have we not all one Father? You're not superior because of the color of your skin. The Bible says, he hath made of one blood all nations of men to rule on the earth. Now Darwin thought that a married man was a poor slave worse than a Negro. Regardless, we won't comment on whether it's true or not, but if it's not, by the way. But if a professor said that today, how long would he keep his job? Or his life? Some of these feminazis would go kill him, wouldn't they? And yet they praise Darwin in our school system. Louisiana, I don't know if they got it passed or not. They were working on a bill to ban the teaching of Darwin because of his racism. Very interesting approach. Yeah. I mean, if our school started teaching the teachings of Adolf Hitler and made it mandatory reading, wouldn't people get upset? Well, why aren't they upset about the mandatory teaching of Darwinism? Darwin said, the chief distinction of intellectual powers between the two sexes is shown by man's attaining to a higher eminence in whatever he takes up. Whether requiring deep thought, reason, or imagination, or merely the use of the senses and hands, the average mental power in man must be above that of woman. Darwin finally married his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. Nobody else would take him. Darwin thought men were superior in every single way. Darwin believed in inbreeding, so he married Emma, his first cousin. He wanted to raise a superior stock of children. He ended up having 10 children. Mary died shortly after birth. Anne died at 10. Robert was born retarded and died at 19 months. Henrietta had a serious nervous breakdown at 15. 3 of his other 6 sons were ill so often, Charles regarded them as semi-invalids. So much for inbreeding, Charlie. Evolution is the foundation for communism. Communism, started by a guy named Karl Marx, removes God from authority and puts man in his place. He says there is no God, so man must be in charge. Missionaries have said when they're working in a country and the communists take over, the first thing the communists do when they come into the country, they go into the schools and they start teaching communism? No. They start teaching evolution. They start by laying a foundation of evolution, and then they bring in the teachings of communism. Communism can't thrive in a place where people believe they've got rights that come from the Creator. And the creation movement in America is one of the biggest hindrances to the advancement of the New World Order. And they very much would like to get rid of guys like me who don't believe in evolution. The guy who founded the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, or the Anti-Christian Lawyers Union, whatever it is, Roger Baldwin said communism is the goal. You ought to read the history of the founding of the ACLU. One of the purposes of that lawyers' movement was to advance the cause of communism. Karl Marx, whose real name was Moses Mordecai Marx Levy, alias Karl Marx, when he was 17 years old, he wrote a beautiful paper telling how much he loved the Lord. High school graduation, he had a paper saying, man, I want to serve God with my life. Then he went off to college. He studied philosophy, and a college professor turned him away from God and turned him on to the teaching of evolution and destroyed Marx's whole philosophy of life. Karl Marx was destroyed by this teaching. You know, 75% of kids from Christian homes that go off to secular schools lose their faith. I meet them by the hundreds all year long. Some college professor destroys their faith. Karl Marx later in life said, my objective in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. Marx based his whole philosophy of communism on the idea of evolution. Karl Marx even tried to dedicate his book to Charles Darwin. From a sincere admirer, Karl Marx. Marx knew his theories would not survive without evolution as the foundation philosophy. They go together hand in glove. Karl Marx had 6 children. 3 died of starvation in infancy. 2 others committed suicide. When Marx died, only 6 people attended his funeral. But his philosophy is still ruling 1/3 of the planet today. You know, 1/3 of the people on planet Earth are under communism right now. Started by a loser who never worked a day in his life, let his own kids starve to death. He was a loser. Karl Marx developed what we call the Communist Manifesto in 1848. You want to take over a country? Here's how communism works. First thing you do is abolish private property. And by the way, this is the real purpose behind the environmental movement in America. They're not trying to save the environment. Some probably are. But the basic idea behind the movement is abolish private property. You got to get their permit to cut down your tree. That's where it's headed, folks. The Bible talks about private property ownership quite a bit. You know, every 50 years you got your property back. You could not lose it forever. Your family's going to get it back. If you're a loser, you're lazy or whatever, you don't pay your bills and they take it away, your family will get it back every 50th year. The Bible talks about having his own vine and his own fig tree. Drink water out of your own cistern, running waters out of thine own well. You know, the solution to pollution in America is private property ownership. Ask anybody that's ever owned a house and rented it out to somebody else. They will understand. Renters don't look at property the same way owners do. How many know what I'm talking about? Okay, there you go. And the more property the government owns, the worse pollution is going to get. Peter Burrell, the president of the National Audubon Society, said, "We reject the idea of private property." Well, he's got a good communist philosophy along with Bill Clinton and Hillary. Here's a pledge of allegiance put up at a public school in Massachusetts. Look at this carefully. "I pledge allegiance to the earth, which I do love and depend on, and to all life and land, air and sea, which is as much a part of earth as me." At a 3rd grade school in Wisconsin, here's the pledge the kids say. "I pledge allegiance to the world, to care for earth, sea, and air, to honor every living thing with peace and justice everywhere." 3 days ago, I was speaking in Minnesota, and I got to see this young man again who's now grown up. But he told me a couple of years ago, Jacob did, he said, "Brother Hovind, when I was in 3rd grade at Johnsonville Elementary School in Blaine, Minnesota, his teacher, Ms. Klobhockey, took down the American flag and made the kids pledge to the earth instead." "Well, Ms. Klobhockey, I will buy you a one-way ticket to the Soviet Union on the condition you use it and you don't come back. Call me anytime. Well, I'll buy you one." I've been to communist countries, folks. Trust me, you don't want what they've got. Now, America has lots of problems, I understand. But I love my country, folks. I fear my government, but I love my country. There are basically 2 philosophies of government. One is based on evolution thinking, which says laws come from man's opinion. How do you decide right from wrong? Oh, man gets together and we decide. Second thing, they say rights are granted by the government, and the government should be the provider. The government provides everything. This is called a democracy. Democracies always become dictatorships. They are horrible forms of government. The government should provide everything. When they were debating about health care here in Pensacola, I heard on the radio, several years ago, talking about a national health care plan. I thought, did you know 70 to 80% of all health care costs are from self-induced problems? Somebody wants to drink or smoke or take drugs, and when they get sick, they want me to pay for it? They were debating on the radio here in one of the WCOA, I think it was, talking about should we have a national health care plan. I called in. I said, I think it was Luke I said, "Hey, Luke, I think we should have I got an idea here." I forget how I started off. I said, I forgot to change oil in my car, and I blew the engine. I think everybody should help me pay for it. They said, "Well, if you forgot to change oil and you blew your engine, that's your problem." I said, "Well, this is exactly the same idea with health care. If you don't want to take care of your health, I guess that's your business. But if you get sick, why should I have to pay for it? If you don't want to brush your teeth and floss your teeth, you do whatever you want. They're your teeth, but I'm not going to pay you to get you new ones."